Tropical depression Julia advances over Guatemala as it left a trail of destruction in El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, Colombia, and Venezuela. Haiti's Senate ruled out the government's request for the immediate deployment of foreign troops to secure a humanitarian corridor. And also, President Vladimir Putin confirmed that Russian forces carried out a massive attack with high-precision, long-range weapons against Ukrainian energy, military, and communications targets. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news. On Monday, tropical depression Julia left El Salvador coasts and headed to Guatemala after its wind force downgraded from 65 to 55 kilometers. According to the U.S. National Hurricane Center, Tropical Storm Julia is forecast to move westward towards the far southwest Gulf of Mexico during the next day or two, as heavy rain is expected over portions of southern Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala during the next couple of days. For its part, the National Weather Institute of Guatemala informed that flood landslides are likely to occur in the region, which has been under alert since last Thursday. The weather phenomenon left damages in Venezuela, Nicaragua, Honduras, Colombia, and El Salvador as a Category 1 hurricane and as a tropical storm. On Monday, the National Coordinator for Disaster Reduction in Guatemala reported that over 66,000 people were affected by Tropical Depression Julia prior to its landfall in Guatemalan territory. In Guatemala, Tropical Depression Julia prompted floods and swept one village in the Zacapa state. According to the local authorities, the greatest damage due to the floods is concentrated in the departmental capital of Puerto Barrios, Izabal, and several nearby municipalities. The disaster reduction entity also highlighted that there were 3 bridges collapsed in Izabal, as well as 3 highways, one in its department, due to the intense rains. Given the situation, the government of El Salvador declared a national emergency on Monday as a preventive measure in the face of the advance of Tropical Depression Julia. El Salvador Civil Protection declared that the measure is due to the latest forecast of rain resulting from the climatic phenomenon, which has already hit the Colombian archipelago of San Andres and Providencia. In this regard, the National System for Prevention assured that more than 800 houses were reported as flooded, other partially damaged and swollen rivers. According to the report, more than 9 shelters have been used, alongside 24 refuges, assisting about 1,000 people in vulnerable situations. Nicaragua remains on red alert due to the persistent rains accompanying Tropical Depression Julia, a situation that caused several rivers to overflow in that Central American country. The executive, headed by the President Daniel Ortega, ordered to take to the final and needed extent the measures and mechanisms of protection of the population during and after the transit of the event. In addition, local authorities were issued emergency plans and to implement actions of search, rescue, and salvage of the affected population, the transfer to safe places, medical assistance, damage assessment, and other relevant provisions to preserve life and infrastructure. Also in Honduras, the Garifuna community of Nueva Armenia, Atlantida, is at risk of being cut off and of the river entering their homes due to the passage of Tropical Storm Julia. Let's remember, the Garifuna community is of Black and indigenous descent, systematically neglected and therefore more vulnerable to this phenomena.
What we are experiencing in the region, because despite the efforts and mobilization we've made for the construction of the riverbank, we are in a very critical moment for our community. We all have to the riverbank. The community will flood and cause heavy damage, and we hope not to have to regret it.
In Venezuela, authorities and the organized community are deployed in Las Tejerias, Aragua State, after the landslide caused by heavy rains related to Hurricane Julia. On Monday morning, Venezuelan authorities gave a report on the situation and said that so far 25 people have died and 52 are missing. They also detailed that the heavy rains caused several creeks to overflow, sweeping away houses and flooding the streets of the town. In this context, ministers, rescue teams, community leaders, and the people in general are carrying out recovery tasks in the area, searching for survivors and distributing aid to the affected. President Nicolas Maduro Moros declared 3 days of national mourning starting on October 9th in solidarity with the affected families. Regarding the situation in Venezuela, its president, Nicolas Maduro Moros, wrote on his official Twitter account, "The people have a government that remains deployed 24 hours a day to provide protection, care, and our hand of solidarity in any circumstance. That is our flag, humanism, brotherhood, and mutual support." Former President of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, also expressed all my solidarity with Las Tejerias, Aragua, and Venezuela. A fraternal hug to the families of the victims and the missing persons. And in the aftermath of Hurricane Julia's passage, currently downgraded to a tropical depression, Barbados Prime Minister Mia Amor Motley took to Twitter to express her solidarity with the Venezuelan people, given the situation in the Tejerias region in Aragua State. The tweet reads, "I send my most sincere condolences to the government and the people of Venezuela after torrential rains caused a series of devastating landslides, which have claimed the lives of dozens, with far more still missing. Barbados stands with you during this difficult time." And on the same line, in Nigeria, on Monday, at least 76 people died after a boat sank in the southern state of Anambra. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari reported that the boat carrying 85 people capsized due to flooding in Ogubaro, a town in Anambra State. The president added that he prayed for the rest of the souls of those who died, as well as for the well-being of the victims' relatives. The country's emergency services announced that since 2012, more than 300 people have died and at least 100,000 have been left homeless by the floods in the nation. We'll take a short break, but first, remember you can now follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Haiti Senate called for a reversal on the government's request for the immediate deployment of foreign troops to secure a humanitarian corridor. In a resolution signed by 9 of the 10 active senators, the lawmakers encouraged the State Office for Citizen Protection to work with human rights organizations to allow the transport of fuel from the Varro terminal, currently blocked by armed gangs. According to the authorities, the move is intended to avert a major humanitarian crisis in the wake of the sudden resurgence of cholera and rapidly deteriorating security situation. The request for foreign troops has spawned criticism in Haiti from organizations and personalities who recall the failures of past interventions. And France is awaiting signs that confirm the beginning of a solution to a strike over refinery wage claims, which affected fuel service at 3 out of 10 stations on Sunday. The cause of the service halt at many stations in the country is a strike led by the General Confederation of Labor to demand a 10% wage increase in times of galloping inflation, but it is very difficult for people to abstract from the impacts of the Ukraine's crisis on the energy sector in the run-up to winter. Unions leaders are not optimistic about a positive outcome of the negotiations.
If management comes to the negotiating table from this afternoon, from tomorrow, we will go. If what comes of the negotiation is of a nature to finally affect the demands of the strikers, then we will resume work immediately. For the moment, the management has just made an announcement to try to shift the responsibility to the strikers, but it's only an announcement. Today, we have no guarantee that we will get any concrete measures.
Now we move on to other topics. President Vladimir Putin confirmed that Russian forces carried out a massive attack with high precision, long-range weapons against Ukrainian energy, military and communications targets. During an operational meeting with the permanent members of the Security Council in Moscow, the president stated that the Kremlin Defense Ministry, in accordance with an elaborate plan approved by the Russian General Staff, carried out several attacks on Kiev points and also in key points of Kiev's military, energy and communications infrastructure. Putin also stressed that the intellectual and material authors and participants of the attack on the Crimean Bridge were the Ukrainian security services. The president also reiterated that Ukrainian crimes cannot go unpunished and severe responses will be taken in case of possible new attacks by Kiev.
By its action, the Kiev regime has de facto put itself in a row with international terrorist formations with most heinous groups. To leave such crimes with no response is just not possible anymore. This morning, of the advice of the Defense Ministry, and according to a plan from the General Staff, a massive strike was carried out with high precision. Long-range weapons from air, sea, and land, on energy, military command, and communication facilities in Ukraine.
The Russian president also informed that after an investigation, it was concluded that the explosion on the Crimean Bridge was an Ukrainian terrorist act aimed at destroying Russian civilian infrastructure.
Yesterday, Alexander Ivanovich Bastrykin, chairman of the Russian Investigative Committee, reported to me on the first results of the investigation into the sabotage committee on the Crimean Bridge. Data from forensic and other examination as well as operational information indicate that the explosion on October 8 is a terrorist act aimed at destroying Russia's critical civilian infrastructure. It is also obvious that the masterminds, organizers, and perpetrators of the terrorist act are the Ukrainian Special Service.
And President Putin also assured that Moscow remains willing to help the new members of the Russian Federation through humanitarian support.
Consolidation and solidarity of our society are clearly manifested in the readiness to come to the aid of the new Federation members to restore peaceful life in the liberated territories. Regions are collecting humanitarian supplies, take patronage over settlements or entire regions. I'd like to thank everyone involved in this work. I'm sure that our fellow citizens feel the support they need.
Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning for China said at a daily press briefing in Beijing on Monday that all efforts conducive to the peaceful settlement of the Ukraine crisis should be supported. Mao made this statement in response to a question about multiple explosions in Ukrainian capital Kiev on Monday. She expressed that the Chinese side has reiterated their position on the Ukrainian issue on many occasions, and they always uphold that the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of all countries should be respected. Moreover, Mao said that the purposes and principles of the UN Charter should be followed and the legitimate security concerns of all countries should be valued. The spokesperson stated that they hope that all parties could properly resolve differences through dialogue and consultation, and that China is willing to continue playing a constructive role in easing the tensions. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Japan is trying to promote the consumption of rice flour products as the global wheat prices scale up because of the conflict in Ukraine and the Japanese yen's plunge. According to a Japanese media report on Sunday, as more and more Japanese have chosen bread and noodle as their staple food, rice consumption in Japan has been steadily declining. The conflict in Ukraine has caused wheat flour prices to increase all over the world, which compounded with a weak yen further increases wheat flour prices in Japan. Japan imports more than 80% of its wheat. Given the situation, the Japanese government has decided to offer subsidies to farmers, encouraging them to produce more rice for animal fodder and for flour making, whereas noodle manufacturers are increasingly turning to rice flour. Now we address other topics. Japan will open its borders to tourists and lift visa restrictions as October 11th for the first time since they were implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic. This measure comes after immense pressure from the tourism sector and international travelers for Japan to ease its border restrictions and resume visa-free travel. Japan is the only G7 country to have maintained arrival restrictions for so long. The Japanese government will also begin a new domestic tourism subsidy program, effective also as of October 11th, hoping that domestic and international travelers will come to rescue of an ailing tourist sector. Analysts said that the new measure, combined with a weak yen, will likely favor the recovery of the tourism industry. The leader of the People's Republic of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, supervised the training of a tactical nuclear weapons unit to verify and evaluate the country's nuclear war deterrence and counterattack capability, according to official North Korean sources. Kim's supervision of this unit coincides with military exercises conducted by Pyongyang between September 25th and October 9th. According to the state broadcaster, Kim was present and gave orders during the military exercise, which included a ballistic missile launch drill under the simulation of tactical warhead loading. According to Pyongyang, the tests are motivated by the arrival of the area of the aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan and its strike group to participate in joint exercises with South Korea and Japan. In Malaysia, Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob announced the dissolution of parliament, paving the way for elections to be held in the next 60 days. During a speech to the nation, the premier assured that with the dissolution of parliament, power is returned to the people. He also said the elections are expected to help unblock the political crisis in the country since the resignation of Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad. According to the authorities, the elections are expected to be held at an early date, before the rainy and flood season, which usually takes place in December. On Monday, French Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne arrived in Algeria to pay an official visit. As part of her agenda, she met with Algerian Prime Minister Aymen Ben Abderrahmane. The French delegation trip to the North African country comes just 6 weeks after President Emmanuel Macron concluded his own 3-day visit as part of her rapprochement. After the meeting, French and Algerian prime ministers declared their wish to deepen their countries' ties and address topics such as economic cooperation, visas handouts, historical memory, and healing wounds following the 1962 war that ended the French colonization of the North African country. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.